what is AI in the context of law, right? We're going to talk about the thing that people commonly call generative AI, primarily, but we're also going to touch a little bit on the other forms of AI. And it's important to understand the distinction. Okay, so stop me if this is a little bit over what you've heard before. We have AI is an umbrella term, meaning anything that you do that's essentially reproducing what a human would have done. So anything that involves a computer taking some information, processing it, and making decisions or creating new things. That's split up into two, essentially, forms of splitting. So we have a way of splitting it based on how it works and what it does. How it works, we have what we call classical AI or rule-based AI, which is where we actually define the rules and we say, sometimes you might hear the word decision tree. It's, hey, if this, then that. Right. If it's this, then you're going to take this path. If it's that other thing, we're going to take the other path. If you find this, whatever. Then we have machine learning, which is different because we essentially say, hey, here's the kind of thing you're going to do. Then here's a bunch of examples. Figure out how to fit the algorithm in order so that it matches the examples. That's then further split into something called deep learning, which is where we use deep neural networks, a specific kind of algorithm where we typically use something along the lines of gradient descent or various alterations of it to optimize to a particular set of data. Now, a deep neural network is what we call a universal function approximator, meaning that it can do anything if you say it in the right language. All right, so that's how it works. Typically, we're dealing with deep neural networks these days, but actually we're often dealing with a combination. What it does is the other important thing to consider. Typically, we can split this into about 3 categories, and there's quite a bit of overlap. We have prediction or classification, which is, okay, cat, dog, right? What is this picture? Right? What is this? This is a television. There's a list of categories, a multiple choice question. Alternatively, hey, here's like a history of some form of, let's say, market trend. What do we think the next price is going to be? Assigning it a number, right? Predicting a value. Then we have search. Now, search is, hey, here's like a whole bunch of things, like documents or, I don't know, facts. We want to find what's most similar. We want to identify, say, hey, which of these pictures best matches this text query? Which of these documents is most related? Which of these papers contains the answer to this question? That's all search-based. And then we have generative. Generative means that we're going to create something new. So generate some text that you haven't seen before. Generate some images. It's free form. There's not as much of a limitation. The reason that these get muddy is because we use the same underlying techniques for all of them. So you might hear things like, oh, well, they're predicting the next word. Well, that's because at a technical level, that's one way of describing what the network does. The reason we say it's generative and not predictive is because it's free form. So I don't know if that was a little bit over people's heads, but the idea is that we have to understand which type we're talking about, because we use all 3 types. We're going to be using generative AI in order to draft documents in law. We're going to be using predictive AI in order to classify, say, whether something is privileged information or whether something is likely to come out in a certain way in court. And we're using search techniques in order to find relevant cases, find relevant documents to a particular query. Okay. Now, what are we using those for in law? Okay. Current applications are essentially in 3 big categories. The biggest one that everyone is using these days in litigation is e-discovery. And typically these are rule-based techniques, but now people are using deep learning techniques. E-discovery is when we have, hey, we're looking at this case, there's all of these different documents, we want to find what documents are relevant to the case, we want to figure out what we have to disclose to opposing counsel. And in order to do that, since there's thousands, we're going to put them in a database. We're going to use search-based AI techniques or predictive AI techniques in order to say, hey, is this privileged? Is this something we have to disclose? And there's existing solutions. Thomson Reuters has a handful. I think they're probably the best ones. Lexis also has various different solutions for it. Compliance work, also mostly that sort of classification, where we want to file our documents in a consistent place. We want to make sure that our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. Almost said that backwards. And legal research is when we want to answer a question. So, can I foreclose on this property? What's the case law on this? Or, hey, what can I do with this contract? Can I sue for the following? Is this a breach? How will a court interpret it, right? I want to find cases. I want to find examples. So those are the three basic categories. Now, like I said, e-discovery, AI is everywhere. Compliance, yeah, that's a shaky one. Research, AI is getting everywhere. Now the other thing, which is where Gen AI comes in, is drafting. And drafting is something that any business owner might be very tempted to do with AI. And I have to say, get a lawyer. You do not want to draft these documents if you don't know what you're doing, because there will be a provision that looks right, but isn't. And I can show a bunch of examples. And I was kind of hoping to get a little bit of an interactive approach and seeing how people might try and interact with AI and show how you might have an issue with the outputs that you wouldn't realize. So, will AI be your paralegal? Not a chance. Unless you're a lawyer, in which case it will be. In fact, the American Bar Association has put out guidelines as for the ethical usage of AI, which essentially says you can use AI in exactly the same ways you can use a paralegal. You have to supervise them, you're responsible for their outputs, you have to make sure that they don't disclose any confidential information. And there's a lot of work being put into establishing what systems can be used, what is reliable, and what is not. ChatGPT, I know you mentioned earlier, you have a bit of an issue with people putting things into ChatGPT because of information leakage. Well, that's due to two things. Number one, that's because of obviously, when you're sending something to ChatGPT and that's public, you're sending it over the internet. Someone else is going to see that when it's stored. And the other problem is that ChatGPT is self-learning. And this has a big issue internally, whereas, say, if you're a law firm, you have two different clients. You don't want the information from one client leaking into the other clients. So when you have a self-learning system that will respond to its outputs, right, based on what various different things have been put in the past, it could have inadvertent leaks. And in fact, the ABA, when they released their guidelines in Rule 512, they actually explicitly said that self-learning systems was something to be aware of. Now, there are systems that are explicit for law, like Lexis Plus AI and CoCounsel from Thomson Reuters, which is the company that owns Westlaw and stuff like that. There's various others, like if you want something for contracts, there's Harvey. But, what? Go for it.
Which of these systems are free of cost?
ChatGPT?
Not the legal ones, though.
No, they're crazy expensive. Actually, to get Lexis Plus AI, I don't even think you can unless you're a law firm, because the normal Lexis plans don't include it. To get CoCounsel, you can. Harvey, not sure. But they're expensive. I mean, they're really expensive. And the outputs of ChatGPT, if you're not worried about confidential information and you know what you're doing, emphasis on that last bit, are good enough. So let's get a little bit of a survey. What have you wanted to use AI for, but have been scared of?
Back
Yeah, yeah.
So, I wanted to use it as a liability release form. So for people to sign for a physical liability, like they went to sport.
Have you tried it?
I have. I don't know how legit it was.
All right, let's see what happens. Let's see if there's any glaring issues. Let's try it first with ChatGPT. And I want to see, because it's going to make a huge difference, how you put in the prompt. And then we'll see how someone else might put in the prompt. Okay, so here I've got ChatGPT window. Seriously? I build technology, not use it.
Beautiful.
It's a stock wallpaper. All right, here's ChatGPT. And this is the time when it decides to learn. All right, let's get a prompt. Go.
Yeah.
It was your idea.
Can you draft a liability release form for pickleball?
Okay. Oh, I am not connected to the internet, am I?
That would help.
We can try it with a local model. We'll see how that works. Hang on. Here we are. Let's see if it wants to work now. Seriously? Okay. Pickleball liability release and waiver form, participant name, date of birth, address, phone number, email. Assumption of risk. I understand that participating in pickleball involves inherent risks, included but not limited to physical injury, property damage, or even death. I acknowledge these risks are inherent in the activity. Okay. I consent to receive medical treatment, not typical in a liability form. Indemnity. Typically, you would use a stock clause here. Photo media release. Okay, acknowledgement and understanding for participants. I mean, typically you would include a link to the rules. Also, there are all sorts of other things you would want in there, just in any document, like, hey, where can you sue me? That it didn't include. Okay, this part is correct. The parent or guardian. Now, let's see what a system dedicated to an action like this would do. Let's try Lexis. All right. Okay. If it doesn't freeze, 1 second. So we can go to Lexis Plus, and then we can create a new conversation, generate a draft. We're going to give the exact same prompt. Oh, by the way, I selected Florida. It didn't just do that intelligently. Unfortunately, it doesn't do that. Now, it's like you're drafting a clause, right? Because it's like liability release isn't a contract. That's a clause in a contract. That's something that goes in addition to it. Definitions, participant, organizer, inherent risks. This is exactly the same kind of language you would use in the previous one. And then here we have, see? Governing law, severability, etc. All of these parts that you always want in a contract. Photography consents to using this. Amendments in writing, I don't think you would actually include that because there wouldn't be amendments to this. Contact information would go in a section here. You see? So this is a much more fleshed out agreement. However, if I were to print this, this would be too long. You're really better off just Googling it. So let's now Google.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Maybe. Cool. Free. Florida.
Oh.
Sorry. It's hard when you're looking at that. Done. Like seriously, you put the things into this thing. It's a form creator. These are pretty quick, and you know these are good. Well, they're quick when you have internet working. Alright, maybe AI's not so bad. Yeah. Look. See, acknowledge that this involves certain things. Carefully read this. Right? We kind of missed that. I hereby acknowledge that I've carefully read this in both outputs. Right? It says that I've read this, but I don't know. There's standard language that you would typically use. So, okay, can I draft a liability release form? Sort of.
Not quite acceptable.
Not quite
in Florida.
acceptable.
Probably create some issues.
Yeah. But is it enough of a problem that you would have an issue when you get sued? Yeah, especially given that you didn't say where you would get sued. Honestly, people seem to forget this. But you always want to put a choice of venue and choice of law clause. Because you don't want to get sued in some place that you've never been just because that's where someone else is. Let's see. Let's maybe see whether or not it can identify a problem with the clause. Anyone ever considered using it to review a contract? No one's ever even thought about it.
Yeah, so I've considered using it for, I've been in sales for a really long time, so I've considered using it to compare and contrast terms and agreements in similar software vendors' service offerings.
Okay, to compare and contrast.
Yeah.
That might be a fun task to do. Have you tried it?
Yeah. Well, so yes, but what I did was I essentially tried to summarize. What I didn't want to do was plug my company's specific legal language in to a ChatGPT
Why?
because I wasn't sure if I should or not.
That's interesting concern. Typically, you might have some kind of requirements because it could be work product that you wouldn't be able to. But if it's your company, I don't know, you usually can upload the form.
Well, this would be like my personally purchased ChatGPT subscription, not like a company-wide one.
Yeah, I don't know what your company's rules are. Your company might have rules on that.
Okay.
But as for summarizing it, obviously when you're summarizing it, now you've got a double risk. You've got the risk of what happens when you summarize and the risk of what happens when they process it. What? Someone else has a question?
Well, saying any conflicts with this is going to be governed under the laws of the state of Florida or whatnot?
Yeah, you would always add a clause like that.
Yeah.
That's what was missing there.
Yeah.
Now, here's an example actually from Florida where they do something which was a mistake adjudicated by, I want to say 11th Circuit. Hold on. Don't quote me. It might not have been 11th Circuit. I can't remember if it was Georgia or if it was. Oh no, it was Missouri. So, sorry. The agreement was in Georgia for a different thing. This is an agreement in Florida that has a little mistake in it. All right, we're going to ask the question: where can I be sued? Okay. Okay, great. It says, under this agreement, any legal action resulting from the agreement must be brought in Lake County, Florida, as it specifies venue lies there. Quote the provision. Okay. That's the exact provision that it includes. Hold on. Nope, that is not what it says. 1 second. Let us pull this up real quick. Where is it pulling up? Okay, hold on. Wait a minute. It is actually right here. It's 10.1. Okay, this is the clause that's relevant here. Okay, so it quoted the wrong clause. All right. Now let's say look to 10.1. What state did I say it was in?
Michigan.
Correct. That's not correct.
Right.
Because there's one word written in here. Exclusively. This says venue shall lie there. It does not say venue shall lie exclusively there. And there's a court case.
This is what I have to find from Ralph's.
Right here. It is called Jouard v. T-Mobile West. Okay? And Jouard v. T-Mobile West the craziest part is it knows about this.
So it actually distinguishes the case?
Well, no, it
The language.
doesn't.
I know. Distinguishes in terms of the language.
Huh, nice try, except for the language was shall lie in. Fail. In fact, this clause
Interesting.
quotes exactly from that case where it was determined to go otherwise. So that's another example of the failure.
So was that it hallucinating? or-
Oh no, it looked it up.
Okay.
That's embarrassing.
It just didn't catch that word.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you wonder, maybe it's too premature because you mentioned the hallucination word. I mean, I hear a lot about hallucination in AI. Would this end up hallucinating? I don't know if I'm abusing the English language by this question, but do hallucinations typical to some AI applications impact any of these?
So we actually saw hallucination right here. Although hallucination is an interesting choice of word. So there is two phenomena. There is a phenomenon that is more similar to hallucination in a human, which is where we actually have some parallels between the two ideas, and then there's what some of us call confabulation, where it just makes something up. There is an actual interesting thing to study where a hallucination exists because there's some parallel trajectory, if you will. You could think of a geometry of the words, where it's the same shape here as here.
Okay.
So if I had these words, right, if I had claim is not resolved, it would be the same as if I said that in a different language. And it might be the same as if I said something that's actually completely unrelated, but happens to lie in the same place in the embedding space. So.
Okay.